Hello everyone, this is HKR Trainings. Welcome to the session on SQL Interview Questions and Answers. In this session, we are going to cover frequently asked interview questions on SQL. So let us start with the first question. I hope you all can see my screen. Okay, so the first question, generally the trend is it starts from very basics and they generally tend to know if your basics are very clear or not. So the first question itself is a very basic question in the SQL. So what are DDL, DML and DCL commands in SQL? DDL is actually data definition language. So we have set of commands in SQL. Once we go through DDL, DML and DCL commands, we are very much aware of how are we going to use it and when are we going to use it. So DDL is a definition that defines the definition of the language, which is create, alter, drop, truncate, and comment, rename. So as you can see on screen, right, create is to create the table in the database. Alter is to alter the table structure. So if we want to alter any column or any data type, so we use alter command. Then we use drop. Drop is basically to delete or to completely drop that table, drop that object from the database. It can be used for a table, it can also be used for an index and for any other object in the database. Similarly, truncate is there. Truncate is nothing but it deletes the data from the table. Then we have comment and rename. Comment is, these are actually not commands. I would say comment is not actually a command. We can just use it to comment out something so that we can use it as a reference purpose in the SQL code. Then we have rename. If we want to rename any object in the database, then we can use the rename object. Similarly, let's go to DML commands, data manipulation language. We have a lot of DML commands, and it's very important when we understand the basics of SQL. It's very to know the importance of DML commands. So we have select, insert, update, delete, merge, call, explain plan, and lock table. I would start with select. Select is nothing but a, like we say, right? Select statement. Whenever we write the basics of SQLs, we use select. So then we have insert, update, delete. These are the main manipulation languages that we use, the commands that we use. Insert is nothing but inserting data into the table. Update is basically updating the existing data within the table. And delete is also for deleting the object from the table. Then we have merge. It's like an upsert, which we can if this comes to very basic knowledge, then merge is just an upsert operation that is performed, but yeah, it can be used for varied uses as well. Then we have call, and then we have explain plan and lock table. So let's go to the other set of commands, which is DCL. DCL is the data control language, and in control language we generally use only two commands, grant and revoke. So grant is basically when a person is performing a certain set of operations in a database or in a data warehouse, he or she should have that grant to work on it. So grants are very important when we are trying to execute, when we are trying to read, or when we are trying to write. These kind of grants are given. Similarly, we have revoke. So similarly, when we have granted a particular access to a particular user, we can also revoke it. So these are the DDL, DML, and DCL commands in SQL, which is very often used, which is very, it's frequently used because it's one of the basics of the SQL, and it's very important as well. So yeah, let's go to the second question. What is the difference between where and having clause in SQL? It's very important question, very, very, very frequently asked. So where and having both filters out data. Where is mostly used in select statements where we are trying to filter out a certain amount of data based on any given condition. But having is used in a separate data, in a separate query where we are trying to use an aggregated function, an aggregated column. Now let me give you an example. Suppose I use this notepad and I'll say select asterisk from employee where ID is equal to 2. Now, what do we understand by this? We understand that, okay, we are trying to fetch all the records from the employee where the ID is 2. That means for second ID, we are trying to fetch all the details. Now, similarly, if I go to another command and I say select asterisk ID and asterisk as total instances from employee here ID is equal to 2 group by ID having count of asterisks is greater than 1. What do we understand by this query? See, I'm just trying to show the difference here, how where and having clause are completely different. Having, we are using it with a aggregated column. Now the aggregated column is total instances. This is the aggregated column that we have. So when we use aggregated column, we cannot use directly in the where clause. Where clause can only be used for the linear columns, but when it comes to the aggregated columns, we'll have to use it in the having clause only. Now what this query is trying to do, this query is trying to find out the duplicate instances for ID column. So wherever there are more than one instances of ID column in a table employee, it will give you that record. Why? Because I have put that condition in the having clause as count of asterisks should be greater than 1. If I put it as equal to 1, then it will give me only those instances of ID in the table where it has only one instance and not more than that. So I hope it is pretty clear now, the difference between where and having clause, and very important question, this one. Okay, let's move on to the next one then, the third one. What is the difference between in and exist in SQL? Yeah, so as we all know, right, in we generally use as a predicate. So basically the main difference between in and exist is in the subquery is the way in which the query gets executed. In is the inner query and it is executed first, and list of values obtained as its result is used by the outer query. So the inner query is executed for only once. Now what do we understand by in? We understand that when we are using in a where clause or in a query or in a subquery, what are we doing is, here the inner query is executed only once, and then based on its values the outer query is executed. But in terms of exist, the first row from the outer query is selected, then the inner query is executed. That means when the outer query is executed, it gets a number of rows, and that many times the inner query will be executed. So this process of inner query execution repeats as many number of times as there are outer query rows. That is, if there are 10 rows that can result from the outer query, the inner query is executed that many number of times. Now let's take an example here. Let me just use my notepad again. If I go to a basic example, select asterisks from employee here ID in, I'll say 1, I'll say 3, and I'll say 5. Very basic query, right? But we understand the usage of in clause here. In is used when we are checking for multiple values in a particular column in the where clause. That's when we are using in. So here we are trying to fetch all the records from the employee table where ID is either 1 or 3 or 5. Now let's take another example. Asterisks from employee here exists. Select asterisks from geo. I'll say it as B. I'll alias it as 1A. Here A dot geo ID is equal to E dot ID. So what does this query mean and what do we get out of it? Here we are using exist clause. That means the outer query is executed first. Now we'll get select asterisks from employee. We get suppose 20 records. So for each of that record, the inner query will be executed, and it is trying to find out whether the record that we have got from the outer query is matching with the inner query or not. So when it runs the inner query, it is looking for a join condition where A.GeoID is equal to B.ID. So here it is looking for the match in the IDs, and if it is a match, it will show it in your output, and if it is not a match, it will not show it in your output. So that is how it is done. If you see an example here as well, select distinct city from authors where exist, select asterisk from publishers where authors.city is equal to publishers.city. So basically it is trying to find a match between the authors and the publishers table based on the city column, and that is how it works. So the criteria is, when we answer this particular question, it becomes a tricky one, and we need to make sure that we give that thing which the interviewer is probably looking for. So in inner clause, when we execute it, like I said before, the inner query is executed first, and then the list of values obtained as its result is used by the outer query. However, in exist, it is completely different. Here, the first row from the first query is selected. That means the outer query is executed first, and that many number of times the inner query will be executed, the number of rows that we have received from the outer query. So I hope it is clear now. Let's go to fourth question. What is the difference between delete, truncate, and drop commands in SQL? Again, a very basic question, but many people do tend to get it wrong or probably answer it in a wrong way, which does not suit the interviewer. So it is very important to understand this question. Delete, truncate, and drop commands. Like we have already discussed this in the first question itself, but I would like to go back that what are the major differences. Delete. Delete is a DML statement. Delete removes some rows if where clause is used, and it can be rollback. It can be used with or without where clause. It does not reset identity of the table. Triggers will be fired. When delete operation is performed, all the data get copied into the rollback table space first, and then the delete operation gets performed. Hence, we can get the data back by the rollback command. What does that mean? That when we are firing a delete SQL, when we are firing a delete command, we are actually deleting the data, but not permanently. It first goes to a rollback table space. So we have that option. If suppose we want to undo the delete operation, we can do that. We can do that because it is going to a rollback table space first, and we can try and retrieve the data back into the table. So it is a DML statement because it is manipulating the data, and we can also use a where clause in a delete statement, and like I said, it can be rolled back, and it does not reset the identity of the table. What does that mean? That means that if a table structure is in a particular way, it is not going to change anything in the table structure. It will remain as it is. It is just going to delete the data out of the table. Okay. Now we'll go to, let's talk about the syntax as well. So delete from table name where column name is equal to column value. So either we can use a where clause, and if we don't want to use where clause, we just want to delete the whole data from the table, then we can simply use delete from table name or delete asterisk from table name. Asterisk is also equivalent to all. So basically delete asterisk from table name or delete from table name would give me the same result. It will delete all the data from the table. And if we want to confine the deletion of data in a table, then we can use delete from table name where so and so clause that we want to give. Suppose I want to delete a data from the table where id is equal to 2, then I would give delete from employee where id is equal to 2. So only those rows will be deleted where the id is 2. Okay, let's go to drop now. So drop is not a DML command, it's a DDL command. Now why do we say that? Like we have already discussed, it is not manipulating the data. It is simply defining the structure. It's a definition language. So that means it is causing any hindrance in the structure of the table. So drop is a DDL statement. It will completely drop the table. It will not just remove the data, it will completely drop the table or drop the object, and you just cannot find that object anywhere in that particular database or in the data warehouse if you have used a drop command over it. So like we know it cannot be rolled back because it is not going to some rollback time table space. It cannot be rolled back, and removes the table from the database. Table structures, indexes, privileges, constraints will also be removed. Very important to understand. When we use a drop command, it completely removes that table out of the system. There's nothing left out of it. The syntax is drop table, table name. Now the next is truncate. What is the difference between delete, truncate and drop? So we have already discussed delete and we have already discussed drop. Now it comes to truncate. Delete and truncate are very similar. The only difference is that you cannot use a where clause in a truncate statement. So if you want to delete the complete data out of a table, then instead of using a delete clause, we can also use truncate. When we give truncate command, it basically means that it is truncating the table. That means it is deleting all the data from the table. You cannot give any where clause, you cannot confine data, you cannot limit your data. It will just remove all the data from the table. Then that is how it is. And then when you perform a truncate, you cannot roll it back because it does not go to a rollback time space, table space. And then it also cannot use any where condition. So I'll just go through the points that we have mentioned over here. Truncate is a DDL statement. It is not a DML statement. It is a DDL statement. It removes all the rows from a table, but the table structure remains as it is. So basically the difference between truncate and drop is deleting and removing the complete object, the table, the structures, its columns, its constraints. But truncate is not doing that. Table structure remains as it is. Table remains as it is, but the data is gone. That's what truncate does. Cannot be rolled back, resets the identity of the table. Truncate is faster and uses fewer system and transaction log than delete. So that is how, and that is why we can use and we can opt for truncate instead of delete, because delete is a little slow as compared to truncate. Cannot use truncate on a table referenced by a foreign key constraint. So yeah, one of the differences that we have. The syntax is pretty similar to drop. We can just use truncate, table, table name. So as you have noticed, right, in all the DDL statements, we use table as one of the syntax, and it's very important to use. So truncate, table, and then the table name. That is what the syntax is. Okay, let's move on to another question, the fifth one. So we have a table here. We have a table here as table store underscore LOC. I would call it as location. Store underscore lock has store names as given below in the table. So the store names are there in the table as Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, and others. Now it says write an SQL to give short forms to all the store names given in the above table as per the below output. So what it wants is we want a table to be given and to be given in the output in terms of two columns where we have the store names as it is, but we are also displaying the short forms in a new column which we are going to create in our output, which is called as new underscore store. So what is the SQL? What does the SQL look like here? Okay, so why this question is important is because interviewer here trying to check whether you are aware of the decode command or not. So here we can use decode, which is very much used in Oracle. Otherwise you can also use a case statement here, but let's discuss decode right now. So yeah, select store name, decode, then we have store name Los Angeles LA, San Francisco SF, San Diego SD, and others as new store from store log. So what have we done? Decode does nothing but it gives the values that you want to the column values. So in decode the syntax goes like, first we define the column name where we are going to fetch the values. So the column name is store name, as you can see here, right? Then after the comma we use the values which are getting populated from that column. So the first value is Los Angeles, so we have put in Los Angeles over here, and then using comma what are we going to give? We are going to give the assigned value to it, what we want to assign that value, we give it over here. So Los Angeles we want to put it as LA, so that's why we have defined as LA. Similarly, the next value from store name was San Francisco, and what do we want San Francisco to look like? SF, so that's why we have given SF. Then San Diego to SD, and then others remain as it is. So we are not giving any value to others. If there is an others value in the store name, then we want it to populate as it is without any change in the value. So we are now giving an alias name to this column as new store from store location. So this is how the output looks like. So this is how decode works. That's why this question is important, because we are generally trying to look for what kind of function are we going to use when we have to give this kind of an output of assigning values, giving alias names to values as per our convenience. So we can use decode and we can use case statement as well. Okay, very frequently asked question: find the second highest salary of the employee. You know, we generally get this question a lot. Very simple, very basic question. So what do we do is, suppose there is a table employee and we have salaries over there. Now let me just use my notepad here. Suppose we have a table as employee and we have a column as sal, or let's say salary. What are the values that we have? We have 20,000, we have 10,000, then we have 5,000, then we have 60,000, and we have 80,000. Now, if somebody asks you what is the second highest salary in the salary column, we can easily see, right? We can say that 60,000 is the second highest salary because the highest is 80,000. This is good. We can do it manually. We can just look into the table and give that salary. But what about if there are not just six values, there are thousands of values, there are lakhs of values? How do we identify? So for that, we need to write an SQL query. So the SQL query would look like: select maximum salary from employee, where salary not in, select maximum salary from employee. So what are we doing here? We are using an inner query where not in, salary not in. So basically in the inner query, we are getting the maximum salary of the employee. And in the outer query also, we are getting the maximum salary from the employee where salary not in. So what it will do is, in the inner query, it will fetch the maximum salary of the employee. But in the outer query, when it is seeing, it is checking, okay, I don't have to take this particular value, I'll have to take the next one. Why? Because the next one is going to be the maximum, right? So this is how the second highest salary will come. Very important question. Okay, the another one, the seventh question: SQL query to find maximum salary from each department. Very tricky question. Sometimes people don't understand this, but it's a very good question. So we are mostly asked, like we discussed in the previous question, the highest salary, or the maximum salary, or the second highest salary. We have discussed that already. Now, if we want to find the maximum salary based on a particular column value, then how do we do that? We use it using group by statement. So select department ID. Suppose if we want to find the maximum salary of every department. Okay, let me show you one example here. Because something that is very important here to understand: if I have a department column and I have a salary column, so suppose I have IT, then I have BFS, then I have HR, then I have again BFS, and I have IT. Okay, so the salary I have given is 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 90,000, and 5,000. Okay, so again, because by looking at the column values, you can easily understand and say what is the maximum salary of each department. So what is the maximum salary of IT here? For IT we have 10,000, we have 20,000, and we have 5,000. So I can say that yes, 20,000 is my highest salary. Similarly for BFS, 30,000 and 90,000. So 90,000 is my BFS. What about HR? We have only one record, so that means this is the highest salary, right? But if there are lakhs of records and thousands of records, then we'll have to write an SQL query. So to understand this, what we do is we write an SQL query, use the group by flaw. So select department ID, and then we have the maximum salary from employee, group by department ID. So this will show me the maximum salary by each department. Okay. Now let's move on to another question. Write an SQL query to find the number of employees according to gender whose date of birth is between 1/1/1960 to 31/12/1975. Now, why this question is generally asked to understand whether the person who is giving the interview is aware of the dates or not. Is he aware of the group by function or not? Is he aware of the between function or not? And that is why this question is generally asked. So what are we doing here is, what do we want to know? We want to know the number of employees based on its gender whose date of birth is between so and so date. Pretty simple, right? We can find the number of employees. Now to find the number of employees, we use count asterisk, correct? Because count asterisk will give me the count of the number of rows. And then comma, we are using gender. Now why are we using gender? Because it has been asked in the question that we have to do it based on its gender. So that's why we have used gender in our select statement from employees where date of birth is between this date and this date, and then group by gender. So pretty simple, right? So date of birth is between this, and then we are grouping it by gender like we did it in our previous question to understand that what are the number of records, what are the number of employees are we having for each gender where the employee's date of birth lies between 1960 till 1975, the given date. Okay. Another question now. Write an SQL query to find the name of employee whose name starts with M. Now we are now moving on to little tricky questions, I would say, because here we are trying to find out the string functions. String functions are very important because whenever we have such kind of questions, right, like whether the name starts with M or the name ends with R or something like that, we have to use string functions. So this one is a pretty simple one where we don't have to use any function as such, but we just would like to know that how it works. So when an employee name starts with M, how do we find out? We will simply use it like function. So like instead of equal to, we will have to use like, where employee name like single quotes M, then ampersand percentage sign. Now percentage sign shows that it starts with M and then there can be anything from that word. That's what it denotes, and that's why we have to use like. If we use employee name equal to M percentage, it won't work. It will only work with like. So string functions we have to use like. Okay. Okay. Find all the employee records containing the word Joe, regardless of whether it was stored as Joe or Joe. Now what is the difference here? What we are trying to understand is that we are not being case sensitive here. Now suppose in there are 10 records of Joe, okay, in an employee table, and we have it written as in capital, in small, where the first letter is capital or where the last letter is capital. So it will find different results, right? So we have to make sure that we are not being case sensitive. So what do? We use where clause where employee name like starts with Joe percentage, because after that it can be anything, but what we know is that the employee records should contain the word Joe. We can also use this query, and what we can do it, we can just add, suppose if I copy this and I use it in my notepad, right? So here we can also do, we are using upper function. Upper function is basically what it is doing is if the employee name like upper Joe, so whatever it is, either it is stored in small, either it is stored in capital, or either it is stored in mix, it will just change it to upper, and in both the cases. So here if I add a percentage sign here as well, what it is going to do, if we had names like Hojo, if we had name like Joey, if we had name like Mojo, if we have Joe, if we have Joe, everything is going to cover in here. Why? Because I put percentage signs at both the start and the end. So it will consider Hojo, it will consider Mojo, it will consider Joey, it will consider capital Joe, it will consider full capital Joe. Capital it is considering because we have used upper in both the column name as well as the values. And we are going to use like instead of equal to. Pretty clear, right? So very important question this was. The next one, select first three characters of the first name from employee. So select substring first name, comma 0, comma 3 from employee. Very simple. If we want to know further for the first substring column, what I can say is substring, as we have mentioned here, what it does, we have to define the column name first. So what the column is, are we looking for? First name, right? Now comma, we give the starting point of the string. If suppose I give 3 comma 3, and suppose value was, I would say David's, right? So what it will give, the result will be, it will start from 3, that is it will start from V, it will start from V and it will go till 3, so ID, so it will give me vid. Understanding? So that is how it works. So 3 here is the starting point and 3 here is the ending point. Now suppose if I give 5, then it will give me widths, right? And if I give here 0, it will give me a width, right? And if I do it now, 0 and 1 works the same way. I can either give 0 here as the starting position or either I can give 1 here. Both are same. We can use it either way. So substring is a very important function. So select substring first name 0 comma 3 from employee. That means it is going to give the first three characters. So whatever the name is, either it is David or Jack, or Jones, anything, it is just going to give the first three letters of that name, because we have give the starting position as 0 and we have give the ending position as 3. Okay. 12. Get position of O in name John from employee. Now in the previous question we used substring. In this question we are going to use in string. What is the difference? In substring we are trying to identify the string based on its length, based on its starting point, based on its ending point. But here in this particular question, in string, what do? In string we trying to find out the position of a particular character. That's what we do. So select in string first name comma O from employee, where first name is equal to John. So in John, if I would say, right, in John O comes in the second position, and here the question is get the position of O. So I can see that John here comes in the second position. How do I find it out? I use in string. So select in string first name comma O will give me second as the output. So the result would be 2. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Get first name from employee table after removing white spaces from right side. Yeah, again, when we use this question, or when we generally being asked this question, we tend to see how can we remove white spaces from the right side. What do we mean by white spaces? Sometimes there are values. Now there are values like, suppose we have David name space 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 space. Okay, these many spaces. Then we have, suppose, Falcon with space 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 space. So there are so many spaces on the right hand side, right? And we want to remove it because in database it goes as it is. Now suppose here we had put in 3 spaces at the right hand side. If we try to find out the length of this particular word, what do we find out? We can see that, right, it is a 5-letter word, so the length would be 5. But no, in database the spaces are equally considered as a particular character. So if we had 3 spaces on the right hand side, it would consider the total length as 8, and this would disrupt the length. This would become a parity question, right? And that is why we want to remove the spaces. And how do we do it? We use rtrim. So select rtrim first name from employee. Rtrim is going to remove the white spaces from the right hand side of the all the values which are there in the column as first name from employee. Okay. Now similarly we have length function. Let me just go back to the previous question. Similarly for rtrim, right, we have ltrim as well. Now suppose in David, suppose there were many white spaces on the left hand side. Now how does this work? We have four left hand side spaces, so the length again would become four left hand side spaces and then David, so that becomes 9. But we want to change it, right? We want to remove the spaces which are not seen, so that's why we use ltrim. So ltrim means left hand side trim, rtrim means right hand side trim. Okay, moving on to another question. Get length of first name from employee table. So length of first name from employee table, a pretty simple question. Length is the function that we use. Select length first name from employee. It will give you the length of that value. Get first name from employee table after replacing O with dollar. This is a very tricky question and a very important question. We can use replace function here. Replace function is actually used to replace a particular string with another string. We can also use it along with numbers, but then we have to make certain arrangements. If it is a number data type column, then we cannot use it directly. We'll have to change it to string. So these are certain alterations that we have to do when we go along, but in basic terms we can say replace is the function that we can use. So even if we say that we can replace here, we can use the function replace in an interview question being asked. The interviewer would understand that yes, he is aware of the function, at least he's aware of how it is going to be used. So that becomes that leaves a good impression of on the interviewer. So select replace first name comma O comma dollar from employer. What it is doing, it is replacing O with dollar, right? Okay, moving on. Another question. Get first name, joining year, joining month and joining date from employee table. What does it say? It says that we want these many columns in our output: first name, joining year, joining month and joining date from employee table. Now we understand that we have only one date column in the table as joining date. Now how do we find out what is the month, what is the year, what is the date? We can easily do that using TOCHAR function. TOCHAR is a very important function here. It is used to convert dates into characters, and that is how we consider it, and that is how we are trying to get information out of it. So when we use TOCHAR here, joining date is the column name, and here we have given the format as YYYY. That means it will pick up joining date. Now let me give you an example in my notepad. If I use a date here as 19/02/2022, I want to find out what is the year in this particular date. So what I'll give is, I'll give TOCHAR joining date is my column name, and then I'll give in single quotes as YYYY. It will do, it will give me the output as 2022. This is my output because I'm getting the year out of it. Similarly, if I want to check, say 20/02/2021, and I want to check the month out of it. So how do I do that? I can use TOCHAR. Joining date is my column name, and I can use many ways. I can use okay, I can use MON. Many ways we can do it, but here I'll use and it will give me 02 as the value. So this is how it works. Many ways we can work, but TOCHAR is a very important function. TOCHAR joining date YYY will become the joining year. TOCHAR joining date MON will become the joining month. TOCHAR joining date DD will become the joining date from the employee. So what we have done is we have broken this date into year, month and date. Correct? So that is what the question is all about. Very good question this was, and it is very frequently asked to understand whether we understand dates or not. Okay. Now the next question is, find the fourth max salary in the employee table. Yeah. So as you know, right, we have already gone through a question where we wanted to find the second maximum salary of the employee. So that time what we did is we used the max function, correct? Here it is asking for the fourth maximum salary in the employee table. So how do we find it out? We can simply find it out using a self join. So what are we doing here is select distinct salary from employee E1. E1 is the alias name, where 4 is equal to, why 4? Because we are looking for the fourth maximum salary. 4 is equal to select count of distinct salary from employee E2. E2 is its alias name, where E1 dot cell is less than equal to E2 dot cell. Okay, so if I just copy this query here and so basically why we are using 4 here is because it is giving to give me the fourth maximum salary. And here what we are doing, we are doing E1 dot cell is less than equal to E2 dot cell. So it is going to give me the exact fourth maximum salary. Now suppose if I want to check the maximum four salaries. Now suppose there are these salaries, right? And I want to check four top salaries. So what do I get it out of here? We get 80,000, we get 60,000, we get 20,000, and we get 10,000. But we will not list 5,000 because this is the fifth highest salary. We don't want it. We want top four salaries. These are the top four salaries. But how do we write query for it? So to write, so top four salaries would come as so select distinct salary from employee E1 where 4 is greater than equal to. When we use greater than equal to, it is going to give me all the top salaries. Why? Because 4 is greater than equal to select count of distinct cell from employee where, so basically what we are trying to figure out, what are the four top salaries. Now if I want to see what are the four most least salaries in the table, so I simply change this to less than equal to. Correct? This is how it works. Again, a very tricky question and a very important question. Moving on to the next one, how to get three maximum salaries in the employee table. Like I've already discussed, distinct cell from employee A, where 3 is greater than equal to, which is going to give me maximum three salaries. Select count of distinct cell from employee B. We are using a self join here. Okay. How to find duplicate IDs in the employee table. I think this is the most frequently asked question in any interview. The duplicate, how to find out duplicate records. So the simple funda is we use a group by and we use having, which we have already discussed in the previous questions. Select ID, count of asterisks from employee, group by ID, having count of asterisks is greater than 1, right? This is and GT, which is actually greater than 1. So this is greater than 1. So what are we saying? If there are multiple instances of a particular ID, we are going to show it here. So why we are using having count is greater than 1? Because if it is greater than 1 means we are getting duplicate rows for a particular ID, which we want to display here. And that is why we are using it. Very frequently asked question. Now the next question, select all records where ename name and any ename may be, sorry, any number of characters, but it should end with R. Okay. So what it is saying here, all records where ename may be any number of character, but it should end with R. So we have already discussed this when we try to find the start of a character or a string, or when we try to find the end of a string, we use like, because it is a string that we are talking about. So here if I show you the query would be like select, if I want to fetch all the columns, then I'll use select asterisk from employee where name like percentage and it ends with R. So I would say R. If I want to make sure that it can be either capital R or it can be small r. I want both. Then in that case, I would use upper name like upper R should give me the result irrespective if it is small or capital. Okay. Okay. Moving on to the next question. What will be the number of rows produced in the output of A inner join B, A left outer join B, A right outer join B, and A cross join B? Very, very, very important question, because this is how the interviewer is trying to understand whether you are aware of joins or not. And even if you are aware of joins, do you actually understand how the join works? This is the best example of it. Now, if we say two tables, in table A we have 4 rows, in table B we have 2 rows. A inner join B. Generally, people tend to give answer as 4. Why? Because this is matching with this is matching with this. So we have got 4 rows. Or generally people also tend to say as 2 rows we'll get in the output. Why? Because this is matching with this and this is matching with this. So we'll get 2 rows. But this is absolutely incorrect. What do we do is, how do join work? A join works in a both way fashion, in a cross way fashion. So if we have similar values in both the tables, it is going to be joining with all. So this particular first row of 1 is going to find a match here and here. Similarly, this particular row will find a match here and here. This one also and this one also. So we'll get 8 rows, right? And in this case, since we have the same value in all the rows for table A and as well as table B, so the outcome will be same for all the joins. A left outer join B will also be 8, A right outer join B will also be 8, and A cross join B will also be 8. So the number of rows that will be produced will be 8 for all 4 scenarios. Very tricky question, but very important question. Okay, moving on to the next question. SQL to add manager names in the output for the below given table, employee. So we have this table as employee ID, employee name, and manager ID. If somebody asks you what is the manager name of clause, what we can say? The manager name of clause is, we know the manager ID of clause. Manager ID of clause is 77, right? Now if I look for that manager ID here in employee ID, 77's name is Jim. So I can easily look and say that yes, clause manager name is Jim, correct? Similarly, who is the manager of Rick? Now Rick's manager ID is 66. And if I see 66 in the employee ID here, 66 is John. So I can say that Rick's manager is John. Correct? So we know how to do it. We know how to manually do it. But how do we write an SQL query? Because there can be lakhs of records. So the query goes like, we have to use a self join. Okay. When we say self join is very important. When we are trying to use one table in respect of two different tables, then we have to use self join. I'll give an example here. Select a.employee ID, select a.employee name, and select a.manager ID. That comes from the table employee A, because the alias name that we have given is A. Then also we are giving another column as b.employee name, and that b.employee name we are aliasing it as manager name. Why? Because that's what we want in our output. So how do we do it? We use all these columns and then we say from employee A, left outer join employee B on a.manager ID is equal to b.employee ID. So what have we done? We have created two tables out of it. So basically, if I go back and if I use this table, employee ID, employee name, and manager ID, we had 3 columns. Now we want to populate another column as manager name on the right hand side. Correct? And to do that, we'll have to use a self join, because we are only talking about one single table here, employee. Now we are trying to treat this table as two different tables. One table where we have the employee details and the other table where we have the manager details. And that's how we do it. We do it using a self join. Why have we used left outer join? Left outer join we have used because there is also a record, an employee as 99 whose name is Brooks, but he doesn't have a manager ID. That means he is the ultimate boss and he is the owner, and he doesn't have a manager if we talk about this table. So to include this particular record as well, we are using a left outer join. Clear? Okay. Moving on to another question. SQL to give maximum raise for each BU by proving all the columns for that row in the output for the below given table. So what do we want to know? We've basically, see, there are two parts of the question. One we have already discussed. We are trying to find the maximum salary for each BU. Right, we have already discussed that. But the second part says we are just not looking for the BU and the salary column in the output. We are just looking for all the columns in the output. So basically we have to find out those rows which have the maximum salary for that BU. So how do we do that? We can do it in multiple ways, but here I'm going to discuss rank function. Rank function is very important and we can use it here. So what are we doing? We are using an inner query. So let's talk about the inner query first. Select asterisk comma rank over partition by BU, order by race, descending. So if you see the previous question, right, where we discussed that maximum salary, I would just write it here. Select ID comma maximum salary as new cell from employee group by ID. Now what does this query will give me? This query is going to give me the maximum salary of each ID. So here we discussed, right, if we want to see the maximum salary of each department, we will give select department comma maximum salary as new salary from employee group by department. Right, this will give me the maximum salary for each department. But here we are talking about the other columns as well. I just don't want the salary and the BU column. I want to see the HRA also and I want to see the ID also. So that's why we are using rank. Rank is not doing anything, but it is just using the partition by BU. That means the way we use group by, we use partition by. Partition by BU, order by raise, descending. That means it is going to order the salary in a descending manner as rank 1. So this is our inner query. So here we are using an outer query and we are selecting all the columns that we want. We want ID, BU, raise, HRA from the inner query where the condition is rank 1 is equal to 1. That means the rank 1 is going to give the top ranks and we are going to use only the top ranks, and that is why we are going to get the maximum salary. See, partition by BU, order by raise, descending. This what it is doing. It is doing in a BU. Let's go back to that example. Suppose IT. So if I use a rank function here, the rank function, it is giving the ranks based on its salary. So this will get the first rank. Okay, this will get the second rank and this will get the third rank. Now for BFS, this will be the second rank and this will be the first rank. For HR there is only one, so this will be the only rank, right? So now in order to find only the top salaries of each BU, what I can give? I can give where rank 1 is equal to 1. So 1, 1 and 1. All these are the maximum salaries for each BU. So this way we can get all the columns. Okay. But this is a very tricky and a very important question. Now another question is query to show first name only. So the tricky part here is we have a column as a name where we have names as Patrick space Jones and Rick space Glore. What do we want? We want that we get only the first names and not the last names. So how do we do that? We need to find out the space. If we find out the space, then we can give the first name. That's what we are doing here. Select substring name, comma 1, comma in string name space as first name from employee. So what are we doing? We are using in string inside substring. In string is used to find the location of a particular character. And since I've already told, space is also considered as a character in SQL. So we are going to find the position of space, and that will be our last position in the substring. So substring name is the column name, 1 is the starting position, and in string name space, that is going to be our last position, the ending position. So that is how we get only the first names. Okay. Next question. SQL to calculate the sum of positive values and negative values in a column charge and display in two different columns. So what it is showing is, suppose we have a column as values. Okay, and we have values as 20, then we have 30, then we have -10, then we have -40, and here we have 50. So it wants an output like positive and negative. In positive, we should get the sum of all the positive. That means 20 plus 30 is 50 and 50 plus 50 is 100. So we should get 100 here. Similarly for negative, we should get -50 because -10 -40 is -50. This is the output that we want. How can we achieve that? Using a with clause. With ABC as select sum of charge, because charge is a column name, as low. Now we are considering it as a negative from test1. Test1 is the table name where charge is less than 0, right? So we are already filtered only the negative values, comma DEF. This is we are treating as another table. Select sum of charge as high from test1 where charge is greater than equal to 0. So all the positive values. Now after that we are going to use select low, which was this column name, high, which was this column name, from ABC, this table name, comma DEF, this table name. What have we done? We have created two different tables out of one single table, and then we are populating it in the select query. This is the power of with clause. Very efficient, very effective. Okay, next question. SQL query to display multiple projects in a BU separated by comma. This is a very simple question actually, but people who don't know about list tag function, they will not be able to answer it. So we just need to know that we can use these kind of transformations in the data using list tag function. So the function is list tag, very important. We can just remember as it is. So what are we doing? Select BU and list tag. The projects is the column name, and in the string what we are providing is a semicolon. Within group, order by projects, descending, right? As new projects from test1, group by BU, order by BU, descending. What it is doing, it is going to group all the BUs, all the projects by BU. Now suppose IT has Hitachi, IT has Infi, IT has L&T. What it is going to do, it is going to put IT, Hitachi, comma Infi, comma L&T. So which was in different rows, we have clubbed them together into one single row. Similarly for BFS, it was city and PNB, right? But now that with our query, we have changed it to one single row. BFS, we have city and PNB. Similarly, insurance city. So what it does is select BU, list tag projects, semicolon, within group, order by projects, descending. This is the order that it will populate in a descending order within the projects, and we are aliasing it as new projects. Okay, this is how it was going to work. So list tag is a very important function. Anywhere we come across this kind of a question, we can use list tag as it is. Okay. Next question, display pass for all the null values in ID column when the data type of ID column is number. Now many people tend to get this wrong. If suppose we have been asked this question that how do we populate ID as pass when it is null, we simply say okay, we can use NVL function. But NVL function, we need to understand that NVL function is directly going to give values only for string data type. So where ID is a number data type. So for numbers, we cannot pass a string as a replaced value. We'll have to pass a number here. So if instead of pass, if it would have been 0, we could have been easily given it. But to make it pass, to give string as pass here, we have to first change the number data type to character. And that is why we are using toChar inside NVL. So NVL toChar ID, what have we done? ID had a data type as number. We are now changing it to string, to character. So now that we have changed the data type, we are passing a string as PASS from test2. So two things here are very important. First of all, how do we give a default value, or how do we replace null values in a table? We can replace null values in a table using NVL function. This is one part of it. Now the second part is how do we replace null values in a number column, ID column, because it is a number data type, with a string. How do we do that? So in that case, inside NVL, we have to use toChar, because that way we can convert the number data type of that ID to a string, to a character, and then we can pass whatever we want as a string to replace the null values. Correct? Okay, so 28th question is display pass for all the null values and fail for all the other values in the ID column when the data type of ID column is number. So this is a enhancement to the previous question. Suppose we have an ID column here and we have 10, 20, null, null, 30, null, 40. Now it wants that all the null values should be replaced with pass, that we have already discussed, but all the other values should be replaced to fail. So the new column that we are going to be populating as new ID should be like this: fail, 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 and fail, and all the null values would be populated as pass, 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 and this one also pass. Right? This is how they want it in the output. How do we do that? We know we can use NVL to replace all the null values with pass, but then how do we change the other values as fail, all the other values? We can use NVL2, because NVL2 is an enhancement to NVL. NVL was to replace null values with anything that we want. NVL2 gives another option, as we can replace the null values with anything we want, but we can also replace the other values with anything we want. So basically what we are doing, we are using NVL2, and inside that we are changing the ID, because ID had a number data type and we are changing it to string. So we are using toChar. Now comma fail, that means whatever is not null will become fail, and then comma pass, whatever is null will become pass. So the syntax goes like NVL2 in brackets column name, comma default value, comma null replaced value. That is how it goes. Okay. So NVL2 it's a tricky question. People tend to give wrong answers here a lot, but this is to understand that when we want to give default values to other not null values, then we can use NVL2 function. That is what the difference. Sometimes people also ask what is the difference between NVL and NVL2. So now that we have understood, we can easily give an answer to it, right? Next question. SQL to get only those cusips which have only digits and does not contain any alphanumeric character nor any alphabets. Now suppose we have a column as cusips. In cusips we have values as 9891 9200. Then we have 91AB. We have ABCD. We have 92 $. Okay, and then we have 9931. So here, if you see, we have three different types of values. In fact, four different types of value. We have complete numerals, we have string along with numerals, we have complete strings, and we have alphanumeric characters also. Now, the question has been asked that we want to find only numerals. That means this one, and this one. How do we do that? We can use regular expression. So select distinct cusip from TPOD holding, that's the table name, where regular expression like cusip is the column name, and then this whole string. So we can just remember it as it is, because that is how regular expressions are used. Regular expressions are used to find such kind of anomalies in data. Okay. Last question. SQL query to count the number of vowels in the name. Now suppose we have a name here as Mrinal. How many vowels do we have here? We have I and we have A. That means the number of vowels is 2. We have another name as David. So what are the number of vowels that we have? 2. Then we have another name as Jacob. Here we have number of vowels as 3. Right? We can do that manually. How do we do it? Through a query. So what do we have to do is we have to write another query here. Select mname regexp count. So regexp count is another regular expression that we can use. Regexp count, mname is the column name. Then we are giving all the vowels that we have, A, E, I, O, U, as vowel count from dashboard. So basically what it will do, it will calculate and it will count all the vowels in mname column and it will populate over here. So that's the power of regular expression. We can calculate these kind of things, we can count these kind of things. So anywhere where we get to these kind of questions, we can use regular expressions. Very important. So yeah, I think I have covered all the questions that were important in an interview for SQL. I hope it will bring a lot of knowledge and understanding, and it will help everyone who is going for an SQL interview. These questions will generally come, and you all will be able to answer these kind of questions now. Thank you for your time.